Governor Chris Christie is not the only potential 2016 Republican presidential candidate to have a very bad day. Rand Paul woke up to a Wall Street Journal editorial calling him, quote, unsuitable to be commander-in-chief, following Rand Paul's calls for leniency for Edward Snowden. The conservative editorial board of the Wall Street Journal wrote, arguing that Edward Snowden is some kind of national hero shows an unseriousness about national security that would make him unsuitable to be commander-in-chief. Rand Paul is also getting some backlash from more hawkish members of Congress, including the former head of the House Homeland Security Committee, Republican Congressman Peter King, who said this earlier this week.
We can have honest differences about what their policies are, but Rand Paul's creating this hysteria. He's playing on some sort of
fear-mongering.
I don't know, libertarian, scaremongering, isolationism, and rather than using intelligent arguments, as people could well do, he's resorting to fear. He's appealing to the lowest common denominator.
Senator Paul responded to Congressman King's criticism by saying this.
I think when people are so over the top like that and really so bombastic that most people discount it, I think as probably it's taken for what it's worth. And see, the thing is that's lost on a lot of people is I am in favor of the NSA. I am for spying on terrorists. I just think it needs to discriminate in the sense that you go to a judge, and the reason that we separated police power from judicial powers to have some checks and balances, and people who don't understand the importance of separating the judiciary from the police power, really, I just don't think are very thoughtful people.
Joining me now is Steve Schmidt, MSNBC political analyst and former senior advisor to the McCain campaign. Steve, I don't want to get into the Edward Snowden issue in particular. What I'm interested in here is in terms of a Republican presidential campaign, how this issue plays. And what we saw today was a very important side of the Republican Party speaking in that Wall Street Journal editorial, saying if you are for leniency for Snowden, then you are unfit for the presidency. What I'm interested in is how this works on a Republican debate, primary debate stage, and who will be playing what roles in this debate.
Look, I think that Rand Paul, Lawrence, more and more is assuming the role that his father played, for example, during the 2008 presidential debates, where he was an outlier. The one thing that all the candidates agreed all the time was that Ron Paul was way out there on 9/11 conspiracy theories or a number of other issues. And Rand Paul's just frankly had a bad 2013 when you look at the plagiarism issues, when you look at the Southern Avenger, the person who wrote all the outlandish columns that was working in his office. You know, he's demonstrated, I think, over the course of the last year that he has difficulty running a U.S. Senate office, let alone any prospects to be commander-in-chief. And certainly inside the Republican Party, there's not a great deal of sympathy for Edward Snowden, or is there much of a constituency in the Republican Party that wants to see him get clemency? That being said, I think there are legitimate Fourth Amendment issues. I'm certainly not a person who supports the untrammeled national security state, and in the name of security that we should have all these invasions of privacy. So there are legitimate issues at stake here, but I think Rand Paul's demonstrated himself increasingly as a very flawed messenger, and the Wall Street Journal editorial board is a powerful messenger. It's a powerful voice inside the Republican Party as in terms of shaping the debate around a primary process.
Steve, the thing that always interests me about Ron Paul's campaigns is that he did say, he went up on those stages and he said very brave things to Republican audiences that Republican audiences didn't want to hear. Very brave anti-war statements, kind of thing Rand Paul would also, I think, probably be willing to say. The big difference, it seems to me so far, is that no one ever thought Ron Paul had any chance of winning a nomination or winning any real collection of delegates in the process. And so it was easier for Ron Paul to be brave because he was never actually running for president. The perception is that Rand Paul will really be running for the nomination. And so that's what interests me about him being consistent on some of these points that cost his father. Now, is there any value in the Republican primary for voters to look at it and go, well, I don't agree with him on this Snowden thing, but I admire him sticking to his principles on this?
We'll see how he performs in the debates. He's going to need to make arguments much more cogently, much more coherently than he already has. Earlier this year, for example, he got into a tussle with Chris Christie, and Chris Christie came out on top on that. So when he gets into the combat arena of the Republican presidential debate process, we'll see how he does. Can he make arguments? Can he advance his position? Can he draw people in to positions that have typically been outliers inside the Republican Party? Now, I would have argued, and I did argue a year ago, that I thought he was going to be a very serious candidate for the nomination, one of the top three, and I think he's fallen off that perch over the course of a very bad political 2013.
Steve, to Chris Christie, he's let this story hang out there all day today, getting worse by the hour, literally without saying a word. Very uncharacteristic reaction by Christie. He's got someone on his staff who's caught in the texting email saying, and
red-handed.
It's red-handed. It's time to cause problems on that bridge. What should Christie have done today? What does he have to do tomorrow?
He should have fired her today. Should have fired her hours ago. And he needs to clean house with every person who's involved in this. Look, there's exactly zero evidence, exactly the same amount of evidence implicating President Obama in the IRS abuse of conservative groups. There's no evidence at this point that Chris Christie knew anything about this. There is substantial evidence that people close to him committed an outrageous and egregious abuse of power. And so in this situation, there's great opportunity for Chris Christie, and there's great peril for Chris Christie. The brand of Chris Christie demands that he cleans house, that he holds people accountable. This is what people are sick and tired of, whether we're talking about the people that caused the financial crisis, the people that have mismanaged wars, the people that have caused so much problems in Washington. So he's got a big day ahead tomorrow. When you run for president, you don't have the option of hiding out for a day when there's a bad news story at you.
Well, he certainly cannot fire Miss Kelly until he knows for sure that Miss Kelly is going to back him up on that public statement that he knew nothing about this before today. Steve Schmidt, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Great to be with you, Lawrence.
Coming up, Republicans and the war on poverty 50 years later. And in the rewrite, an explosive day at the White House press briefing room. Explosive as far as the reporters were concerned anyway.